Chapter 2 Hero of the Forest. Morning had come to the rural outskirts of Hyrule, bringing with it a gentle wind that rustled the leaves while the sky slowly faded from a dark blue into a warmer red. The first ray of sunlight that peeked over the horizon caused the birds and squirrels of the forest to stir, as did the rumbling of a lone carriage. Its wooded wheels creaked as the carriage bounced along the road, carrying with it a group of travelers as well as the coachman, all of whom started to feel safer as the sun gained height. Being that there was such a large distance between villages on this route, it was common for travelers, mostly nobles who ignored the advice of their driver, to find themselves in the middle of this forest when the sun went down. Fearing bandits and monsters, they would force the coachman to keep pushing on through the darkness instead of making camp, which of course left everyone fatigued and sluggish when morning came. The driver of this carriage was no exception to the pattern, and he was so tired that he was almost unable to stop the horses when a red and blue robed figure suddenly appeared in the middle of the road from out of thin air. However, his senses were quickly brought into focus when the figure tossed a ball of flame from his hand and the driver had to fight to keep control of the startled horses as a line of fire formed where the ball landed. "Ha ha!" the robed figure exclaimed in an overly dramatic tone as the horses backed away. "You unwary travelers have fallen into my trap, and now you must hand over all your valuables. If you wish to survive, that is." "What is going on out there?" an exceptionally wealthy passenger demanded as he stuck his head out the window. "Who is this person, and why is he blocking our path?" The driver was about to say something, but was interrupted as the robed figure tossed more flame at the ground, startling the horses until the driver couldn't prevent them from backing up into a large tree. The figure then vanished, causing the passenger and his daughter to gasp in shock when he reappeared between them on the bench an instant later. His face was covered except for his piercing eyes, and the two gasped again when he put an arm around each to pull them both in close. "Who am I?" he replied in the same overly dramatic tone. "Why, I am an evil wizrobe, and I am here to take what is yours. For your safe passage, I demand rupees, jewels, those nice boots you are wearing, and her." Quickly pulling the young woman onto his lap, the robed figure vanished again, reappearing where he had started an instant later, this time carrying the passenger's daughter in his arms. He then uncovered his face before turning sideways and kissing her, dipping the startled girl back so far that she was almost upside down. Her arms flailed around for a second, but then she stopped resisting as the kiss continued, and the young woman had a sort of embarrassed smile on her face when he finally stood her back on her feet. "You are most welcome, my dear," he continued while recovering his face. "And as for you in the carriage, know that this was but a small taste of my wicked ways. Now throw out your valuables or I shall corrupt her further." "Not so fast, evil wizrobe," a new voice called in the same overly dramatic tone. "If you wish to cause these good travelers any more harm, you must first deal with me." For a moment none of them could tell where the voice was coming from, but then they looked up and saw another figure standing up in one of the nearby trees on a high branch. As if the complete opposite of the frightening wizrobe in front of them, this newcomer was a brown-haired and good-looking young man who wore a green tunic with brown boots and a Phrygian hat. He then leapt from the branch, doing a front flip as he landed on top of the carriage, only to cry out in surprise as he fell through the soft cover. "Oh, the young man said after landing on the bench next to the passenger. "I thought that was solid. Excuse me." Jumping up and climbing back through the hole he had made, the young man moved onto the driver's seat before standing up again, quickly resuming his overly confident manner as he put his hands on his hips. "You have one chance to yield, evil wizrobe," he yelled while pointing to the robed figure. "Unless you wish to be vanquished by me, the great traveling hero of the forest. Choose now, fiend." Instead of answering, the robed figure tossed another ball of flame from his hand and tossed it at the hero. The young man easily moved out of the way, although it appeared as though the attack might not have hit him anyway, and then he reached behind his back, producing a boomerang. Now it was the hero's turn to attack, and he did so by tossing the boomerang with such perfect aim that it struck his enemy right in the chest. "Oh no!" the robed figure cried out while clutching his chest. "I have been struck down by this handsome hero." The robed figure then cried out in agony while flailing around in an overly dramatic manner before falling on the ground, and the young man laughed in victory as he caught the returning boomerang. Then he jumped down from the carriage and walked over to his vanquished foe before placing a foot on his back. "You learn only too late, evil Wizrobe," he declared loudly, "that wicked men will never succeed so long as men like me are willing to stand against the darkness." "Bravo, great hero!" the passenger shouted while clapping as he leaned out the window again. "Well done! You have saved both my wealth and my daughter's virtue. Please, I insist that you take this reward." He vanished back into the carriage for a moment and returned with a decent-sized pouch of rupees that he tossed to the young man. The hero caught the bag just in time for the passenger's daughter to run up and give him a kiss on the cheek, and then she returned to the carriage. Now that the daughter was past, the driver was able to get the horses moving again, and the young man waved goodbye to them, smiling and remaining where he was until the carriage had rolled out of sight. Once they were gone, he moved his foot off the robed figure and even helped him to his feet once he had rolled onto his back. "That really hurt this time, Link," the robed figure groaned as he took off the hood, revealing himself to be around the same age with blue skin and black hair. "Would it kill you to let me play the hero once in a while?" "Relax, Aghanim," Link replied as he helped him brush himself off. "The villain has to be frightening, or those rich morons would see right through it. And besides, you're the one that can throw fireballs, remember? And that's, well, frightening." It was a performance the two of them had given several times on this as well as many other roads throughout the forest, and each time it worked like a charm. Aghanim would frighten the exhausted travelers with his magic, and then Link would show up and save them just in the nick of time. The terrified nobles were always so grateful for this rescue that they always insisted on giving him a large reward, which allowed the two of them to continue to eat and live without getting a price put on their heads. "So, how much did we get?" Aghanim asked as they started walking down the road. "Well, let's see," Link replied, digging through the pouch. "We've got, 6 blue and a little over 10 yellow, so... wow, almost 50 rupees!" This was truly a cause for celebration, since in this part of the kingdom where things were considerably less expensive than in the more populated northern regions, the possibilities were almost endless with that money. It was rare that such an amount would be gained from a single mark, and this would move Link a lot closer to his goal of purchasing a real sword and shield. The boomerang was nice, and he was becoming quite proficient with it, but he felt that he would be more convincing as a traveling hero if he had these things. Aghanim, on the other hand, used what he saved from their intake for other purposes. A lot of times he would buy the components necessary to make explosives, or even magical elixirs that could heal almost any injury. However, these components were expensive, and the items in question were difficult to construct, so the number he carried was always quite limited. As for weapons, he mostly relied on his magic, but vanishing and producing flame were not the only things he could do. "Looks like the start of a beautiful day," Link said as he looked up. "Not a cloud in the sky and plenty in our pockets." "Indeed," Aghanim replied. "A real shame, though, that the girl from the carriage couldn't stay. I wonder how angry her father would be if he found out how good she was at kissing." They both started laughing at this, and for them, this really was the ideal way to begin the morning. Through the canopy of leaves that shaded the road, a clear blue sky was visible, and aside from their footsteps, the only sound was that of unseen animals scurrying along. It was still a few miles to the nearest village, and once there they would not only be able to buy the things they needed, but also maybe even afford a decent place to sleep for the night. The cave they occupied certainly had its charm, but there was just something special about 4 walls and a roof. "Did you hear that?" Aghanim asked as he stopped walking. Link's fantasizing was interrupted as he stopped as well, and sure enough, there was a sound that did not belong in the forest. It sounded like something moving quickly through the lower shrubs and branches of the forest, but bigger than an animal, although not as fast as something that size should be. A few moments later, the mystery was unraveled, when it wasn't an animal that stumbled onto the road, but an old woman who did not appear to be having as good of a day as they were. "Help," she coughed between labored breaths when she saw them. "Please help me." Making it about 3 steps forward then, before falling on her face, the old woman appeared to be at the end of her strength as she rolled onto her side. Her clothes were torn in places, probably from getting caught in the branches as she ran, and she was covered in dirt, most likely from several falls while trying to navigate through the trees at night without a candle. But the biggest question as they knelt down to check on her was why? Why was this old woman running through the forest at night? Of course, the answer was quickly followed, as there was some more rustling, before a moblin stepped out onto the road. It chuckled a bit when it spotted them, and slowly advanced, followed by another, and another, and another.